How many? 90. Out here?
It is 4 o'clock. We will call the P&Z meeting to order. Angie, take roll.
Brenna Wagner. Here. Dean Field.
Here.
Jane Corver.
Here.
Mark Klein-Woltering.
Yes.
Tim Potabom.
Yes.
Fred Grine.
Yes.
Dennis Vandenhall.
Here.
Chris Knuckles.
First item on the agenda, I guess we got a new member here. Thanks for being on, Jane. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, and then we will hop right in here with the approval of the minutes from the men. We have a motion to approve those.
I'll make a motion to approve them.
I'll second.
Angie?
Wagner.
Yes.
Corver.
Yes.
Klein-Woltering.
Yes.
Potabom.
Yes.
Grine.
Yes. Yes.
Preliminary and final plat for Bethel site,
Thank you. So let me introduce this item, and then we let the applicant, Justin and his engineer, Landon Lake from Beck Engineering, take the floor if they would like. So if you take a look at items on your phones or iPads, you can go out to sheldoniowa.gov, scroll partway down the home page, you can find our active agenda for Planning Commission meeting. I have a link for the overhead beacon view, link for the August 2 meeting where the new finding announcement proposed up, which isn't in front of you. That discussion was about the minutes of that meeting at the very bottom of the council meeting for August 2. So this is the third time the Planning Commission will have considered a preliminary and final part of the three from city staff, from citizens, from council members, and from some of you as plans. We'll have a single-family dwelling on the avenue side, and on the street side you'll have 3 duplexes for a total of 8 units. Do you gentlemen have anything to add? You want to come on up and introduce yourself? And no? Okay. So the next step after this is once you have given your support for the preliminary and final plat, then it comes to the city council for a set for hearing, and then 2 or 4 weeks after that, preferably would have the hearing. Any questions? Todd, I think that we may have some questions come up on drainage. Do you want to proactively address that? I know that question has come up at the last two meetings. If you want to address that briefly for us.
My understanding, there is no plan for on-site retention, but there are monies, and basically the property will drain to the side that does now. And you can correct me if I'm wrong there. No, that's correct. All drainage, yeah, will be through side yard.
And then you want to come up here, please?
Good afternoon. Landon Lake with Beck Engineering and Sam. Yeah, to the drainage situation, Todd, there will be on-site drainage improvements or stormwater detention. It will be through the rear lots, at the rear lots 3 through 4, in between the duplex and single-family homes, from east out onto 7th Avenue and down to the city system. So the post-development runoff rates will not exceed the existing Bethel that exists.
Grass.
Right, yeah. There's less.
Since we got Landon up there, is there any other questions from him?
So you're saying is there'll be no more drainage than there was before? I mean, runoff?
No, there's less impervious surface improvements as far as stormwater.
Thanks, Landon.
You bet.
No, just one vote, but ask if there's any.
Preliminary and the final. So do we have a motion to approve preliminary and the final plat on there?
Sacks? Need all the sacks of the built?
Steve, the answer is yes.
Correct.
And before we should check. Go ahead, Steve. Come up.
Steve Ogren, zoning. Mr. Sheldon. Just a point of procedure on this. I do want to point out, note that there is one variance that the applicants are asking for on this subdivision. So variances are a little bit unique. They don't can be recommended to council. The variance that they're asking for on the subdivision is the size of the two corner lots on the south end of the property. By code, it says that corner lots need to be 20 feet greater in width than an interior lot, and the interior lot meets the 100 feet width, but then just by the sheer nature of how wide the city blocks, the two corner lots are approximately 115 feet each. So by code, they should be on 20. The developer and engineer put together the best plan they could. Originally, they came in and the lot was too narrow. It was like 95 feet. And we said we need 100-foot minimum lot width. So they widened that out, and then it showed the two outside lots. We can't make the city block any bigger than it is. That's what they're asking for. Pretty straightforward, but I just wanted to bring that up as a point of procedure that should be included in with an or separate motion too.
But then on the two houses, they moved the house back, right?
On the two houses, lot 1 and lot 2, those are the lot requirements. They meet setbacks. 4 and 5, they meet all setback requirements. Everything's good. Checked
Except
out.
for the variance. They need that 5 feet on the corners.
No, just talking about just lots 3 and 5.
Right.
They would be the duplex lots.
Duplexes, yeah.
Yes, the 2 duplex lots, 3 and 5.
And sidewalks and nature are all complied with within this plan as well then?
Correct.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep, thank you.
Before we take a motion, is there any public comments from anybody? Anybody want to make some comments out there? Hearing none. We're looking for a motion. Do we want to include all 3 of these together, or do you want to have them separate? Looking for a motion for approve the preliminary and the final, but we also need one for the motion for the variance also.
Motion variance, as stated.
Okay, how about,
I'll make a motion to approve the plats as well.
so we have floor to put the preliminary and the final plat and variances all in one motion. Is there a second?
I'll second both.
Is there any other comments? Angie?
Trent,
Yes.
Potabom,
Yes?
Brian,
Yes.
Vandenberger. Yes. Field,
Article, there, consider amendment to plan development design process. Ma'am?
Thank you. So this is a product of the discussion that we had with the previous two full plats where there were variants that you needed to grant, and there was several that raised that question, that look at our process, and so that we have done. So Steve, mind describing the amendment for us? And then you and Todd and I talked today about the vote threshold, and our recommendation is to consider making that, just so that we can talk about that when you do your
Correct.
presentation.
Correct. So what we're talking about is planned unit section 1711 in the city's zoning regulations. There's already language within the city zoning ordinance about unit development, but it had been utilized extent at all by the city of Sheldon in the past. Part of it because there was a minimum of 5 acres, and then also some other factors weren't as flexible per se, PUD. So what I did was I went in, instead of starting over from scratch, I just am proposing amendments to the 1711. But these amendments are going to grant the Board of Adjustment much more flexible in the future for development proposals that otherwise don't necessarily fit into the traditional. So the could come in under a P, and they would almost be like asking the city, or in this case the Board of Adjustment, to kind of do that development or specific to that proposal. That's what the PUD regulations will allow. And it's mixed uses. So if a development proposal came in, multifamily apartments with single-family residential,
and say they even want to put in a small commercial use area, they could do that under a mixed-use planned development. You can also have strictly residential planned development. Under a residential planned development, maybe densities or lot size set requirements. Those developers are greater flexibility in order to achieve what they want with the property. They condition under a planned unit development. And in the materials that were sent out to you, basically that text that's highlighted is what's proposed to be new text added to the city zoning regulations. Anything that has a line stricken through it is proposed to be removed from the city. Yeah, and so under section 7 on page 2 amendment says modification to PUDs. And then I apologize, there's a typo in the thing I said, but it should be PUD. But that it says for proposed or planned PUDs, or for existing PUDs, if you go towards the bottom, any such modification, proposed PUD or variance to current regulations be approved by a positive vote of 3/4 or a supermajority of the entire board. So these planned unit developments, since the lines, they include modifications to the city's zoning regulations, which a lot of people would otherwise basically be considered similar to a variance. The entire PUD development is going to go before the Board of Adjustment for review and approval. What this stipulates is that it would have to go before a supermajority vote. In having conversations with city staff prior to this meeting tonight, there were some questions about that as to whether that should be backed down to just a simple. So, and that's a decision that you as the P&Z can make or recommend to the city council if you so choose. So,
How many are on that board?
there's 7, I believe. Standard board in most communities is 5, but I believe the difference in Sheldon is the extraterritorial zoning. So there's 2 members from outside of the city limits that are included in that board.
Mark would be, there's a 7-member board, only 4 are necessary to make a quorum. All 4 could vote yes, and it would still fail because it needs 6 votes to pass.
Right.
So we could only have 1 vote.
Or you could have a quorum to have a meeting, still not be able to pass
Right.
anything. That's the issue.
Well, quorum is 4, but 75% is 5.25 people, need 6.
Right. Yeah. So it does put a heavier burden on the board. I will give you that. But here to support where it's the city's call. But the justification behind a regulation is that you are also giving a little latitude on some of these development proposals. And, you know, opportunity for somebody to come in and ask for substantial changes that are not necessarily in compliance with the current zoning regulations. And under a PUD, they're basically asking the city to write individual or unique little micro zoning district for that parcel. In those circumstances that require a burden of proof to show you can prove it. I mean, that's just the background and justification for where that language comes from.
Do you think if percent would work at the council?
From the city attorney's and from came here with him, his comments was, he goes, I believe I sent you that language on the 3/4 vote.
Oh, okay.
So that's, yeah, I didn't get to, if you meet, that's where that originated from.
Maybe we could do it, the quarters of the board of no, we can't, because it doesn't come to the, does it?
No, but the board is final say.
But doesn't it say city council? Isn't there a section with, did I read that wrong?
Where they exist, when it says council.
Where's that at?
Supermajority of the entire council?
The last word of the second paragraph is council.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a typo on part. Catch that under the second paragraph. I apologize. That's on my part.
So either to go to the council.
No, it would go before the Board of Adjustment, and then the board.
Where's Rowan?
Now I believe it does go through that process, yes, to the council.
approve this, it's gotta go to the council, get really approved, so they're giving up support.
The city council would have to approve this amendment to,
And in doing so, they're giving up.
well, I mean, my time has been short-lived working with the city, obviously, but I haven't done any planned unit development with it. I know the last time it was petitioned to be city. Like I said, it just, the regulations are there, it's just never been utilized. So we're trying to create a set of a little bit, and is gonna grant a little bit more latitude, but within that latitude, there's always give and takes. And, you know, the part of that is discussions with the Board of Adjustment. Ultimately, it would go before the board like a variance case.
You know, thinking about this, I wonder if, so if we would 7
Mm-hmm.
instead of 6.
We can
and
change that.
As I, thinking about this, a higher, because the elected officials can't consider.
Correct.
Their
And-
appointees can, but they can't. So
Right.
it might be,
And on
maybe
a-
to do 70%,
on
but
a-
I worry just about if we have the, you know,
I do understand, and it's a very valid point.
especially certain times of year when I three farmers on the
I
board.
totally
you know,
get it. I totally get it. And every work with fights the same battle with getting people to a quorum. But the point being is, on a pretty major development project, do you want the hands resting in a vat of just potentially 4 out of 7 members could say yay or nay on a project?
Then I'd be all for 5 out of 7, but 6 out of 7 is gonna be tough, but
Right,
5 out of 7, I think,
right.
should be
So
the
it's,
minimum.
and that's why we're having this discussion. I mean, technically, it's up to you guys as a board to make that recommendation to city council, what you deem to be appropriate.
Because we don't approve it, we just recommend.
You recommend these changes to the council. Correct. But I think they consider your guys' input pretty important.
Any other questions of Steve?
Yeah, just, and I apologize, but what was the long memory, what was the impetus for the, who did you, to said, hey, we need to, you come?
I would say discussions with city staff and that, and there's a couple of bills that this might be applicable to. I don't know if they're far enough along the road to say that they will or not, but, you know, and this is not a project. This is talking about changes down the road to make development options. If somebody wants to pursue a PUD, a little bit more easier or flexible down the road.
One example where this really would have been helpful, Chris, been the Sunset Hotel. That's an example where this would have come in.
Yeah. Or even the, you know, as Sam kind of alluded to, kind of the original full project that came in with a lot more townhomes and a heavier base development and type like that, could have fallen to a residential plan development type proposal. But they didn't see that, well, that size of that pretty didn't fill regulations for PUD, so it didn't qualify. Yeah.
It was a 5-acre.
That was the primary reason on that property.
So these are the 5 changes in the 1, 2, and 3 bullet points that you have underneath.
Mm-hmm.
Where it used to be 5 acres.
Right.
Where are those coming from?
So, and honestly, it's just a recommendation. You know, they're flexible, but the old adage is you set it at 2 acres, somebody's going to come in with 1.8 acre project. You set it at 1 acre, somebody's going to come in with 5 acre project. So, I mean, you can even set it all the way you want, it's eventually not going to be requirements. So you have to draw a threshold somewhere. I think you get around that bigger size, that's kind of what we thought, that threshold was kind of holding tight, so.
Go ahead, Sam.
In the event that someone comes back with a project that is the requirements, how is that different than what we've been doing?
Their options is to do what the city does right now, is follow the zoning regulations. And quite honestly, the discussion just has to be made that if their proposed project doesn't fall in the context of that particular zoning district, different zoning district, you can always go through a rezoning process. But if it doesn't meet the guidelines within a particular zoning district, you know, they might just have to look at a different pier or something to do what they wanted. ultimately.
So they would make their request to this group or to the Board of Adjustment?
If they're in a planned development, it would go before the Board of Adjustment.
But like smaller.
I don't know if that's, I don't know if that's possible. They wouldn't have a place to go. We would just say that that's not a feasible alternative at this point, if that makes sense.
Process to request variance, like that.
You'd really have to request to change the code.
Yeah, it would be come back through this same process and having to go through an amendment to the code, and we don't want to do that kind of ad hoc all the time. So, you know, I guess at a certain point, like I said, we just have to draw a bottom threshold. You know, you get down small enough, you don't want necessarily a PUD, planned development district, on the side or foot single-family residential lot. That doesn't meet the intent of planned development. So, in my professional opinion, it's kind of a threshold criteria.
So it might.
Go ahead, Sam.
Go ahead, Myrna, if you have anything else. So if you look at heavy industrial code, which a lot of the west side of Sheldon, a lot of residential properties are zoned as, the minimum lot area is 1 acre. Well, most of those, I can't think of hardly any of the lots over there except for the large, AGP and Ag Partners that are that big.
No.
And so that was part of the discussion is if we're looking at facilitating redevelopment in that part of town, some of which really needs redevelopment, what's the best way to facilitate that?
Correct.
And then listening to that conversation, the conversation that we had about Bethel, where there was 12, 15 variances for the subdivision.
Correct.
And then how do we design it so that we can help facilitate redevelopment,
on a
the
little bit
west
smaller
side.
property.
Right.
Right.
And I believe if this passes, there'll be some opportunities in that part of town very soon.
Yeah.
There's some exciting opportunities that I think that we take advantage of if we do this.
Any questions of Steve?
Maybe just one. So any appeal process by a neighboring person?
That question, I don't have a copy of the ordinance in front. Is not the entire set of regulations. You can see we're amending Part 5 and added in portions of the overlay. I believe there is a notification process. I can't believe that there would not be, especially going before the Board of Adjustment. I think it's basically similar to the variance notification process.
Yeah, for the Board of Adjustment, you'd call the Board of Notification process.
Right. It would be notification, neighbors within 200 feet, and public notice and a public hearing.
Double check that.
Steve?
Absolutely. Thank you.
So I guess we're looking for just a resolution to
Yeah.
approve?
My recommendation, a motion that appeals to city attorney and staff final review for the hat on the voting to make it 5.
Can you say that again, Sam?
A motion to recommend approval, subject to a city attorney review and an amendment of the vote threshold to be 5 members or so, instead of 5% or 6 members.
Just we're not approving it, we're recommending for approval, so.
I made a motion.
Do we have support?
No support.
Any other questions, comments? Angie?
Addabon?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Wade?
Excuse me.
Do I, Angie?
Sorry, Knuckles.
I'm actually gonna abstain anyway, but
Okay.
It's my fault.
Number 5, consider amendments in orders requiring elevators for apartment building construction of greater than 2 stories. Sam, is that 2 stories or 3 stories?
Even 2, right now you can have up 3 stories.
Okay, so we're moving 3 to 2.
So yeah, we're saying if you building, you would need, apartment building, new construction, you would need to have a elevator in it. So, this is based on feedback I've received from citizens and council members over the last several years. There is a new building that's going up hopefully soon that the council had approved urban revitalization tax credits on last year, and that and they have voluntarily agreed to put in an elevator, so this really isn't relevant for that particular permit, but it's something that I was asked to explore and bring forward, and it's something that I personally have an interest in as well. I think accessibility is important. I think Sheldon has a disproportionate number of people with disabilities. Due to the presence of the village, we've always prided ourselves in being a very welcoming community for people with disabilities, and because there are many advantages to not having building inspections and building permits. We have zoning permits, so we typically only get into quote footprint issues and conformity issues. But there is a section in the zoning code where we are allowed to delve into issues. This is something that can be inserted into our zoning code, so it is required. So again, this isn't going to affect any that we are aware of. It simply sets the tone for the future.
Just to be clear, we're going from 4 to 3. 4 is the state code.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, or greater than 2, however you want to put it, but
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, state code says you need an elevator of greater than 3 stories, 4 or above. Cities that have building inspections have boilerplate codes that say you need to have an elevator at 3. So,
And we're what presently, Sam? Where's Sheldon present?
oh,
We have
it's completely silent on it, so
Mhm.
it's
We don't
based
have
on the
anything.
state code, which is 4, which is why you can end up with a 3-story apartment building that doesn't have an elevator in it.
Question on section 9, it talks about you needing exceed 50% of the value. Is that in one unit? 25% and a 25%? I would never hit that threshold. Is that right?
Steve?
That would technically be considered probably what we call a loophole.
I think it's fair though, because if you put a roof
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
it's going to cost you 20%. If I think 50% is one major improvement. I just want to make sure I understand this, that we don't seem to.
Oh, and to be honest with you, that 50% clause is consistent elsewhere in the city's current zoning regulations with non-conformity buildings. So typical rule of thumb building, and something happens with, say, fire, tornado, whatever, and for some conforming on, to rebuild in conformance, 50 rebuild. So this is being consistent with other language already in the.
Do you see, what are most cities the size of Sheldon? Are they going by the state code, or they?
It's a question. I honestly haven't really done. I'd have to dig into research on that. There's a lot of variability between towns of 5,000 around the state of Iowa. It depends on where your location is. Even if you're a town 6,000, but you're within 15 miles of either the Des Moines metropolitan area or Cedar Rapids metropolitan area, you're probably going to have stricter codes. You're just seeing that from some of those small subs. But in more rural areas, general rule of thumb is probably a lot of rural communities follow state code. That's not always the rule. it's left up to the individual community. What is allowed by state code is the authority to be restrictive than the state, just not less restrictive than the state.
I move we adopt it and pass it on to the city council for their consideration.
Any other questions? Angie?
Hall.
Yes.
Knuckles?
Yes?
Wagner? Yes.
Yes.
Corver? Yes. Klein Wiltshire?
Yes.
Potabom?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Number 6, commissioners' comments and city manager's report. Sam?
So, this is to the planning commission, so I just looked at it, speaks for itself. It's regarding grain elevator permit we don't deal a lot with, but it's good, very good information. So if there's nothing to move in vacant buildings,
And this is better for clarification. Do we vote on any of
no,
this discussion only?
This is report only, and if I sense that your temperature is that you would like to discuss this, we can research this for consideration. When I added the agenda item months ago, there were a number of issues with, there were a lot more vacant buildings than there are now. There still are some, but this is a tool that we could potentially consider. And I just thought I would mention it to you. It seems to have worked pretty well for Lamar's, and I believe that this is something that we could do without having a full building inspection code process. Any feedback on that? If not, we can an agenda when I put this on the last agenda I had a not so hidden agenda, and that was to call attention to things that I thought were an issue. I did hear back from some of those property owners, one of whom came to the meeting and has effort to clean up their property. So in that sense, it's been well, if any of you are interested in it in the future, just let me know and I can put it back on the agenda for further consideration.
Any other? Looking for motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Angie?
Sorry, I missed the support. Dennis? Klein Wiltshire?